Hi, Tove. I had this email from Tisha, and I just thought I might address it with everyone and run through a couple of things. So she's just said, "Hi, Miss. I was wondering if we have notes on the impact of design and innovation on society and the environment, safety and evaluation, or is that should we just know that from our folio? Should it be self-explanatory?" Yes and no. So, like, definitely, you should know about how to talk about the impact on of a product or an innovation on society and the environment. We do that evaluation in our own folios, so we can easily talk about how we know as a designer that we have to consider the impact of that product, how it might have environmental implications during manufacture or during disposal. That could include considering a life cycle analysis, but we can also look at the impact on society. And while the impact on society often can be environmental too, because the long-term environmental impacts has an impact on society, because with climate change and everything that affects us, pollution in our waterways affects us, being able to live happily, healthily, mass extinction, all this sort of stuff. Environment actually ends up having knock-on implications on society too. However, there is definitely a part of the textbook, though, that I want to draw your attention to, so that you can look at it as its own individual syllabus point if you want. So it shows you here, this is from H2.2 from the syllabus. It's chapter 16, the impact of design and innovation on society and the environment. So even though you should be able to talk about it on your own, this is a really good chapter to just have a bit of a look over, because it makes you realize how other things come into play. So it talks about ethics, how and you might think, why? Well, ethical issues are about impacts on society, because and that's why I got you to watch that thing on Netflix, slash that YouTube video on designer babies and genetic engineering. That is one of the examples here. So you don't need to know about what all of these are, but one or two is a great idea, because they are specific technologies that definitely fall under the ethical category of where do we sit, where's the line, are we crossing the line, and going ahead with some of those technologies, just like I said with the movie, just like I was saying the other day with this movie, Never Let Me Go, which looks at, where might we be today if we did cross the line and go ahead with cloning humans and using those clones as spare parts for other humans. So yeah, there's a line. So it definitely falls under ethics, because the impact on society could have huge ethical implications, and what is ethically acceptable. Remember back when we watched Westworld? So I'll get that up again so we remember. Westworld season 1. I even forget we do all these things. Oopsies, images. Yeah, so you might remember Westworld. Remembering that, Dolores and all the other people within the park are all artificial intelligent robots. Artificial androids. We call them androids. Humanoids. Artificial intelligent humanoids. They have the ability to seemingly have emotion and react to situations and experience fear and love, yet they are not real. So I guess that's another example of, a technology, artificial intelligence. It's not one of the ones that are listed there on this list, but it's another perfect example of something that does sit in an ethical line. What is acceptable and what impact might it have on society if we continue with developing that technology to a point where it is used, and what could the implications be of that? What's okay and what's not okay? Is it okay to repeatedly kill her because she's not a real human? But if she has feelings and emotion, yeah, that's why it's ethical. It's a good discussion. So So ethical comes into impact on society, and you can have a read at some of these examples here. Like, I would definitely just have a read of this stuff. You might be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. It also talks about a designer's responsibility in terms of the impact on society and the environment. So, we have a responsibility to ensure that products are safe. Hang on, sorry. It just goes into ethical environmental here. So you've got obviously all environmental things, global warming, pollution levels, that all relates to ethical considerations. Are you as a designer destroying the planet and causing more pollution, or are you and causing entire areas to become uninhabitable, and then that has a knock-on effect with refugees, people having to migrate because they cannot live there anymore, extinction of species, so many knock-on effects. And then, yeah, and anyway, and so then we go back to impact on society, blah, 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 blah. Oh, look, sustainable technologies. Oh, this has heaps of stuff. The textbook is great. Why do we not use this? Because I don't like teaching from it. But I definitely recommend that you have a little look, because everything's in nice little short paragraphs. It's not too full on. Here's a good example of life cycle analysis, from raw materials to transport to manufacturing to packaging to use and disposal. What impacts are going to happen at all of those stages? And can we have a beautiful circular, they call it a circular economy, which you might remember from that biomimicry video that we watched, where there's no disposal and everything becomes raw materials again and is recycled. So that's the ideal. So instead of cradle to grave, it's cradle to cradle. But I wanted to touch on, in terms of safety, because back in Tisha's email, she said, oh, that's the wrong email, sorry. Impact on innovation, society, so impact of design and innovation on society and the environment, safety and evaluation. Now, I want to touch on safety. I'll put this in your folders, so you each have a copy of this presentation as well. Do you remember this one? This was when we went through all the factors affecting design, but we stopped on safety for quite a bit, because that's a big one, where the impact on society can be so great that it can cause death. And this is a really good one to remember, because it links to legislation. And if you ever get a legislation question, a safety question, a work health and safety question, it's always good to have this, to know the specific stuff. So remember, safety or health and safety can refer to two things. It can refer to the safety of the consumer when they buy the product, and so that they're not hurt. And that the example of that we looked at in class was the exploding Pintos or Pinos or whatever they were called, 1973, the cars, and how the Ford was happy to let 180 people die and pay $49.5 million to the families to say, sorry, they died, here's a payout, as opposed to fixing the actual problem in the cars, which would cost $11 per car, but there were so many cars that were made that it would actually cost the company $137 million. And they said, oh gosh, we could fix the cars for $137. We just let 180 people die and we just pay the families, a total of $49.5 million. It's cheaper to let them die. Let's just let them die. You can't let them die. You can't let people die. Obviously, in the 70s, you could. But that is a perfect example of something that, and that along with, today that would never be allowed, because we have the ACCC. Yeah, they decided it was cheaper to let people die than to fix every car. Today, the ACCC would never allow that decision to be made by a company. You can't choose to hurt your customers to save money. You can't, as a company, choose to be dangerous. Like, that's just not an option. So the ACCC, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, they enforce the legislation, the law, the Competition and Consumer Act 2010. It was previously known as the Trade Practices Act 1974, and it would recall all those cars. It would say, sorry, Ford, there's a problem with Ford. Everyone that has a Ford Pinto 1973 model, you need to bring it in and we need to fix the problem. And that government agency would literally not allow the cars to exist on the road. It's not up to Ford. Ford doesn't get to make the choice. Ford has a responsibility as a brand, as a design company, to make safe products. Okay, and what happens if they don't? Well, the ACCC will step in, make them recall the products, fix all the cars, and then they lose a lot of consumer confidence because their reputation is ruined. And people are like, I don't trust that brand anymore because they had deadly cars. And we saw that same thing happen with the Samsungs that were burning through people's legs. on planes and stuff like that, catching fire. Samsung took a hit there. They lost a lot of consumer confidence. They're like, well, I'm not going to buy Samsung if it's going to explode onto my, or like burn through my jeans. So again, ACCC, recall the product. You can't have products out there that are dangerous, that will hurt your customers. Okay, so that's a good example for consumer safety, but that's very different to work health and safety. So work health and safety is the safety that a designer must ensure for the workers who make the products. So not the consumers who buy the products, the workers who work in the factories, or the workers who work in the shop. They have to have a safe environment to work in. And we looked at that example of Radium Girls from the 1920s. And then we watched the trailer of the 2020 movie that came out about that. I mean, I wish we somehow were able to see that, but it didn't get, I don't think it got released here because of lockdown. And anyway, maybe one day. So that's the true story of how these group of girls influenced work health and safety legislation around the world. So the Radium Girls, they were painting the fluoro dials on the clock so you could have fluoro watches and things like that. But to do that, they had to lick the brush, and they dipped it into the radium. They dipped it into the radium solution into the pot, and then to make the brush skinny enough to do a little tiny 2-1-2, they would lick the brush and they would make the nice fine point. But obviously ingesting radium was making their entire bones carcinogenic. They were developing horrific cancers. All their bones were being eaten away around their jawline, and they were effectively dying. They were dying from their unsafe work environment. And they were not offered the correct personal protective equipment, PPE. If they refused to do it because it was making them sick, then they would just lose their job. And we kind of see that happening here. That happened in the 1920s in America, and that influenced work health and safety legislation in developed countries. We now have in Australia the Work Health and Safety Act 2011. The Work Health and Safety Act 2011 requires all employers, all designers to provide a safe working environment for anyone that works for their business. Anyone working in manufacturing must have a safe environment, must have a way to report hazards that they see in the workplace, must have a way to must be effectively trained on all equipment, and have safety procedures. There must be a correct signage for all correct dangerous things. They have to have a safety data sheet for hazardous substances, which has all the, if you accidentally ingest this, you need to call the poisons hotline. So it's a folder that has a safety data sheet for every type of chemical used in that factory, so that they know how to deal with it if there is an outbreak. So you might get it on your skin. Maybe when you get it on your skin, you can just wash it off, okay? But you need to see the safety data sheet in case you do have to go to hospital. Then they also have to provide PPE, so they have to provide all personal protective equipment that you need for that job. They have to provide training and supervision, and blah, blah, blah. So there's all these things that now under this legislation they have to do, and it's because of cases like that prompted the legislation to be created. Now, this is where I've put this one here. In Bangladesh, we've got these factory collapses. Are they following health and safety requirements? Yes, which means it's legal. But is it ethical? No, because they don't have the same legislations as us that protect their workers. They're back in time. They don't have the requirements to where if they report a hazard, it has to get fixed. No, if they see a crack in the wall, they just have to keep working. There's no one that's required by law to fix it for them. So that's where it's an ethical thing, because they're technically all these brands that get stuff manufactured offshore because it's cheaper. They get them manufactured in these factories where the people get paid less and it's affordable. But do we not have a responsibility, a health and safety responsibility? Are those people not technically our employees then, if we're making it for our brand? And therefore, do we not have that responsibility to ensure that they are safe when they are working? So that's where it's an ethical line, because they're not technically in your country, in your factory down the road. The Work Health and Safety Act 2011 New South Wales doesn't apply to them. But that's where it's an ethical thing, because they're still working for you. And so ethically, it's almost that, and that's what this chapter in the textbook is about. Where is it? The impact of design and innovation on society and the environment. That's where it's an ethical thing. What is defined as right or wrong? What is your personal values and beliefs? Yeah, and that can definitely come under a designer's responsibility, and that can be their ethical responsibility. Yeah, ethical responsibility, ensuring that um, that your workers work in a safe environment, ensuring that you haven't, plagiarized or taken over someone's trademark, or you're not in breach of someone else's patent. These are all things that is a designer's responsibility in terms of ethics. But I think the safety one is something that you definitely can bring in, because what I like about the safety example is there's two sides. There's work health and safety, which is about the workers who make products, and then there's consumer safety. And consumer safety comes under, comes under the Competition and Consumer Commission, the ACCC. Consumer Safety, Consumer Commission. Consumers are the buyers, the customers, okay? So if it's about consumer safety, where the product itself can't hurt you, if it's the product that you buy can't hurt you, like little toys can't be made. That's not a toy, it's a peg. But, that might not be suitable for people under 3 because it could be a choking hazard. Yeah, that's all under ACCC, because it's about the safety of consumers when they buy the product. You're not allowed to hurt your consumers. But if it's about the workers making the product, it comes under work health and safety. So I definitely think you should have another flick through this presentation, because this has lots of examples of even success and failure. You can see the success and failure examples that were related to the Google Glass, and that was all about aesthetics and ergonomics. You've got mosquito magnet there, that was a quality fail due to offshore manufacturing, and not they lost consumer confidence because the quality decreased. You've got your example here on the BMW. So the I forget which one it was called. It was the BMW series something. I don't know if I put it there. But anyway, they didn't put cup holders in it, and therefore Americans wouldn't buy it because they couldn't get their drive-through Starbucks. And so that was a design failure due to not doing appropriate market research within the design process, and just assuming what's the best design. That's where designer, you can't assume the best design. You have to do market research. You have to prototype. You have to get feedback. You have to evaluate. And then it links to entrepreneurial activity. So like an entrepreneur's job is to make sure all these things go well. So, a designer might not know about the ACCC. A designer might not know about Work Health and Safety Act. A designer might not know about patents, trademarks, copyright. A designer might not know about how to do effective market research. A designer might just be creative. They might just know how to make things. They might just know how to be good at drawing and come up with cool ideas. That's where you need the entrepreneur, because the entrepreneur are the business people who turn a product into a success when it's released. And they're the ones that know all the legal things and know how to do everything appropriately, so that they are ethical, so that they are following designers' responsibilities, so they are considering the impact on the environment and society. Now, unfortunately, what happens is sometimes the entrepreneur is very money focused and they're all about profit because they might have invested into this design. And if they are all about profit, sometimes the ethical considerations are overlooked. And that's when you have situations like choosing offshore manufacturing, where it's a minimum wage, it's unsafe working conditions, but you can get it made for 50 cents. So it's more money in your pocket at the end. And that's where it's an ethical question. Anyway, so yeah, I'll put this in your drive now so that you've got all these examples. You should remember a lot of these things, so you can have a flick, and hopefully that will help as well. So in answering Tisha's question, should we already know this or should we have notes? Both? I hope that helped. Thanks, guys. Bye. I don't know how to stop this video. Uh, uh.